Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 862, 862, August the 19th, 2019. I'm sorry, August 9th, 2019, Friday. Thank you so much for tuning in. Okay, really busy week where I work. We've had a lot going on. We have a big inspection coming tomorrow, so I've been working a lot of hours. I haven't had a chance really to comment on many videos this week or comment on your comments on the videos this week, so I've been kind of AWOL. Been lucky to get the videos done, actually, the way it's been. But hopefully things will be back to normal here in a couple days. In the meantime, yesterday I mentioned a huge story that's breaking in Australia. Today, I'm going to spend most of the video talking about that because it's important. It's important for two reasons. Because number one of the central characters in this plot is also one of the central characters. In fact, he is the central character in this particular plot in Australia, and he's one of the central characters in the Spygate plot here going on in the US. And they're very, very similar. Now, in Australia, they are referring to this as Australia's Watergate. It is being described as the single biggest political scandal in the political history of Australia. So we're going to be digging into that story, and it's a little bit complicated. I'm going to simplify it as much as possible and leave all the hardcore details and stuff. If you want to really dig into the story, it's fairly complex, but I'm going to try to just give the basic idea of what's going on and how it pertains to what we follow here on this channel for the Spygate story and why it's important to the Spygate story. So I'm going to try to keep it simple and basic. But before I get into that, just a few news items from the day. So let's go ahead and get these out of the way, and then we'll talk about this major breaking story in Australia and why it's so important to us. Okay, so the big couple big news items going on today. Of course, I'm sure something that caught everybody's attention is that we have Andy McCabe coming out yesterday and saying that he is now filing a lawsuit. He's also going to sue the FBI and the DOJ over his firing. And of course, just as I said yesterday, day before yesterday, about Peter's been stroking us, it's the exact same case with McCabe. He also, the lawyers who are filing the lawsuit on his behalf are also right out of the lawfare group. Again, what is happening here is that these individuals have probably been interviewed by Durham. As well as we're hearing up to 50 high-level people, FBI, DOJ, and intelligence figures have been interviewed by Durham. It's also come out in the last week or two that they have received, Durham has received a deposition, audio tape deposition from Mifsud, and anyone who's looked into that and who's listened to any of the reports from his lawyer, Mr. Rowe, know what is basically in that on that tape. It's essentially Mifsud saying that he was essentially cooperating with Western intelligence, and that he was not a Russian asset, and this was all some sort of a plot that he was participating in. Now, he believes that he was set up. In other words, Mifsud is basically going to say, in his own defense, that yeah, he was involved in this plot, but he didn't know about the nefarious part of the plot. That he was just given a limited amount of compartmentalized information and just asked to do a favor to play along with this charade. He's going to say that he was told that they were conducting an investigation, which was to see if Papagalopoulos would be willing to take information if it were offered to him by some Russians. And that's how he's going to play it. But he realizes now, Mifsud, that it was much more than that, and he essentially got played, and that's going to be his story. That's how he's going to try to vindicate himself, get himself out of any trouble, and at the same time not necessarily get him in deep trouble with the deep state for being just some kind of a whistleblower. He's coming forward really because he has no choice. They will eventually figure out what's going on and figure out he's a key person and figure out that they're going to find him. He also probably understands, since the last election, that they now have a president who's pro-Trump. They understand there's a lot of corruption with the previous administration, top-level intelligence people being fired, and this sort of thing. So Mifsud was simply making a decision to do what was in his best interest. seeing based on the events that were going down all around him. He would much have preferred if this thing would have stayed buried and hidden and covered up. But he realizes at this point that that is not going to happen. So this is the same thing that's going on with Peter's Been Stroking Us and McCabe, and I imagine we may hear from others. The Lawfare group probably has spoken with many of the people who have been interviewed by Durham. They know where his investigation is going, and they know that there's going to be a lot of them that are going to be needing good legal defense. And Lawfare attorneys are likely going to be the ones providing the defense for a lot of these defendants. And so what they really want is to be able to do a couple things. Number one, they want to get into the media game and get their clients out there and get them some FaceTime and try to work the political angle. They also probably have some legal strategy, and I would assume that that's primarily what's going on here, is that they want to be able to get the case to at least ways move far enough. They know they're not going to win these cases. Peter's Been Stroking Us, Andy McCabe know, as well as Lawfare knows, they have no chance of winning these cases. So why are they bringing the cases? The only reason they would bring these cases is because they're hoping that they can at least ways get far enough into the case that they can get into discovery, where they can then start getting a hold of information that will better help them provide defense, so that when their clients are charged with these crimes, because they probably know Durham, they probably understand at this point that they are going to have clients are going to be charged by Durham and the Department of Justice, William Barr, are going to be charged with some fairly serious crimes. And what they want to know is what Durham knows and what Barr knows. That's what Lawfare is seeking to do here. And McCabe and Peter's Been Stroking Us really have nothing to lose, because likely Lawfare is providing free legal services for them, because really Lawfare wants this information, but they need a couple straw men in order to be able to do it. They need to be able to bring a lawsuit. And so they've got two people here, and Peter's Been Stroking Us and McCabe, who have nothing to lose whatsoever. And so they would be willing to have this lawsuit. They will be willing to have this lawsuit in hopes that it can get some information that will help them in their defense, because they know they're going to be needing it. That's my take on that. The next big story is, of course, Sue Gordon, who was hoping to be the acting DNI, or is probably looking to be the acting DNI, has resigned. She apparently resigned to Mike Pence, not Trump. That tells us a lot. Tells us she's an anti-Trumper. We already know that she's an acolyte of John Brennan, Mr. Potato Head. So she's going to be leaving officially on August the 15th, right along with Dan Coates. So this is good news, because as I told you, just looking at her bio, I determined that she is total deep state. She is a stooge for John Brennan. And my guess is she knows what's coming down the pike, and she does not want to be the person at the DNI, acting or otherwise. She does not want to be the person who has to provide the evidence that's going to take down her friends. And we don't know that she didn't have some role to play in all of this. So there may be some case of self-preservation as well. So good news for all of us. Sue Gordon is resigning, joining her friends in the deep state, and maybe she's got something to fear, or maybe she just doesn't want to be part of the cleanup crew that's going to take down a lot of her former colleagues and her dear beloved boss, John Brennan, along with Clapper, who actually was the assistant for Clapper, not Brennan, but because Brennan was CIA. But we know that she's another one of John Brennan's sort of pupils, I guess you would say. One of these people John Brennan brings along with him, just like the current CIA director. So anyway, that's kind of how things look there with Sue Gordon. Thank God she's not going to be the DNI, and we've gotten rid of her too. That's good. So, Trump has announced today that he is going to nominate for the acting DNI Joseph McGuire. So I did a little bit of looking into Joseph McGuire. I looked at his bio and I watched about a 15-minute speech he gave at a Rotary Club. My initial take, and again, this is just a very initial take, we won't really know until we actually see him in action. But my initial take on Joseph McGuire, first his bio, he's basically a career Navy SEAL. He has served at every level of the Navy SEALs, from an entry-level Navy SEAL all the way up to the head of the Navy SEALs. So he's a career Navy guy, Navy SEAL, a highly decorated combat veteran. He made it all the way up to the rank of Rear Admiral, so obviously made it pretty high up in rank. I believe he retired from the Navy in 2004. He heads a non-profit which raises money for wounded veterans and their families and things like that. He's kind of does public speaking, motivational speeches and things and such. My general take on watching his speech is that he is not a politician. He appears to me to be just a straight shooter. He's a soldier, not a politician. You can just tell that from watching him. He looks like a straight player. Again, we'll never know until we actually see him in action. But within the first minute or so of that speech that I watched him give, he tossed out that real famous passage from Ronald Reagan, where Ronald Reagan said that every generation is just one generation away from losing freedom. He also talked a lot about our original founding and the revolution. So he sounds like a freedom fighter to me. He sounds like a straight shooter. He sounds like a soldier, not a politician. He looks pretty honest. He doesn't do a lot of political speak type thing. He's just kind of a straight speaker. He seems kind of like a regular guy. Doesn't seem like an elitist snob, although we do know that he has some sort of honorary degree from Harvard, but I do believe that he went to like some other university. I don't think he came out of the Naval Academy, although I'm sure he went to some Naval Academy, but not like Annapolis or anything. So anyway, my general gut take on Joseph McGuire is positive. My general initial take on him is positive. Much, much better than Gordon. I can tell you that. And so I can see why Trump would like him. He kind of reminds me of Trump. He's kind of got that straight shooter sort of thing. He has kind of a patriotic theme. He sounds like kind of like a freedom fighter. And again, this guy's served at every level of the Navy SEALs, all the way up into being the head commander of all Navy SEALs. So this guy's obviously, he's probably pretty solid. He is going to be he's being nominated for the acting DNI. So I think it's probably good, but again, what he's going to be asked to do is going to be to cooperate to take down the deep state. And that is, like William Barr, it's not like your typical appointment to this position where things are just kind of normal. That's not the case. We don't have a normal situation. We have a very very stressful, I would say, situation, an extraordinary situation, where, like William Barr coming in as AG, the same as this man coming into being the DNI, they're being brought in to clean up the mess, not to cover it up. So I feel pretty good that William Barr took the job because he came in to clean up the mess, not to cover it up. That's just my gut instinct. My patience is being tested, but that still is my gut instinct. That hasn't changed. And my gut instinct with Mr. McGuire, Joseph McGuire, is about the same. That he probably understands what he's going to be asked to do, but I think he's going to look at it like a soldier and not a politician. He doesn't come from... Now, he has been serving in national counterintelligence, so he was definitely a player in national counterintelligence, but I don't think that he was involved in the Strzok pre-step group. I don't think that's the counterintelligence group he was involved in. I think it was something else, probably related to the military, the Navy, like Navy counterintelligence or something. So he does have a background in counterintelligence. Of course, he was a Navy SEAL, so obviously they do a lot of that kind of thing. So anyway, my general gut reaction is positive, but we'll have to wait and see how that pans out. But initially, I think he's much better than Sue Gordon. And I don't think he's going to be another Christopher No Shit Sherlock Ray. I don't think that's what we're looking at here. So anyway, we'll see how that goes. We'll keep watching that. More good news here. We have the judge in the Eastern District of Texas has ruled that Ed Butowski's lawsuit will move forward to the discovery process. Of course, Butowski is suing NPR first, and then he'll be also filing suits, if he has not already, against CNN, Vox, the New York Times, and Rod Wheeler and his lawyers. So this is very good that the case is going to move forward, and that means it's going to hopefully at some point maybe get some actual attention from the media, and at some point, if this trial continues moving forward, and obviously it is going to move to the next stage, we likely could see testimony that will back up Butowski's claim that Julian Assange did tell this reporter from Fox News that the Rich brothers, Seth and Aaron Rich, were the ones who provided the DNC emails to WikiLeaks. If this case continues moving forward, that deposition is going to happen, and probably that testimony in front of a jury is going to happen, and that I think the news media will try to hide that, but I think at some point you just won't be able to. And if the timing is right, and that's happening at the same time that we're seeing the deep state being taken down, it could provide for some very, very interesting times ahead. We'll certainly keep watching the Butowski lawsuit. Jerry Nadler has now come forward to say that he is going to open a formal impeachment hearing. Now, the problem with that is he is going to have to illustrate a crime and demonstrate a crime, provide some evidence of a crime. It's going to be pretty hard to do considering Mueller just exonerated him, or Mueller basically said he was not guilty of colluding with the Russians, no conspiracy, and on the other point, he didn't have any finding, but the Attorney General did, along with the Deputy Attorney General, which was that there was no obstruction. So I'm not sure what the basis or the precedent for Nadler is going to be. And again, he's being guided by lawfare people. There's 3 lawfare lawyers that were plugged in to the Democrats to help guide Nadler and Cummings and what's her name, those 3 committees, crazy woman, the California Raisin, Waters, Mad Maxine Waters. So they have these lawfare lawyers who are actually running the legal 3-ring circus behind the scenes, and these other 3, Nadler, Cummings, and Waters, are just puppets for lawfare. And now what the reason that Nadler is doing this is because in order to get grand jury testimony, which is what he's seeking, grand jury testimony, that's sealed testimony, and the only way that you'll ever get that is if the judge determines it's absolutely necessary for an ongoing trial, typically criminal trial. And so Nadler knows this. He knows he's not going to get the ruling unless he's asking for the information in regards to an ongoing criminal hearing. So that's what this is about. Nadler has to be able to prove to the judge excuse me. Nadler has to be able to prove to the judge that this information, this grand jury information, is pertinent to an ongoing criminal trial. Now, the House of Representatives is not a court, so it's going to be very, very tricky. I'm not so sure that this is going to work. In fact, I'd probably say odds are it's not going to work because it's pretty obvious that it's political, but it's going to come down to who the judge is, and we know there's a lot of Obama-appointed judges around. So we will just have to see exactly what happens here. There's nothing there. It is a huge misstep for Nadler and the Democrats. It's going to backfire very badly, but they're hell-bent on doing it. They're absolutely hell-bent on following through this strategy. I'm certain it's not going to work out. Trump's not going to be impeached. Even if it made it to the Senate, McConnell would likely kill it immediately. It'll never go anywhere. It's nothing more than a political stunt in the House, and it'll be interesting to see if Nadler can even get the Democrat votes. The last time he tried to have this vote, it came up way short. He wasn't able to get even hardly any Democrats. I think he only had a total of 94 votes, and he's going to need a lot more than that. So we'll see if he's successful at getting the votes by playing this particular political stunt. I don't think it's going to work, but we'll just have to wait and see exactly how it all pans out. I just don't know. But again, if I had to take a guess, I would say it's not going to fly. It's just a political stunt, and as long as you have a fair judge, they're going to see it as such, and it'll go nowhere. But if you have a political judge, like an Obama appointee judge or something, and again, there's a lot of shenanigans that are being played behind the scenes, it's likely that they'll try to get this in front of a judge like that, in which case that type of a judge may make that kind of a ruling, and they're going to try to use the Watergate is what they're going to try to use as the prerequisite to say, well, the Supreme Court ruled that Nixon had to turn over the tapes, and they're going to try to play on that. But again, it's a totally different situation, and so Nadler is going to have to prove that there is an actual legitimate ongoing criminal trial, and he's going to try to pass off his House, investigation as a legitimate investigation, and that's going to be where it's all going to come down to. Is it a legitimate investigation, or is it a political exercise? And that's going to be the where the decision will be made. We'll keep watching, but again, even if it goes forward, I believe it's going to be a huge misstep and a huge backfire against the Democrats. But they have nothing to lose now. They already know they're going to get their ass kicked in 2020. It's only a question of how bad. I guess they feel they have nothing to lose. Now, this story may have huge implications for the Spygate story that we're covering here. It's happening in Australia right now. They're calling it the biggest political scandal in Australia in their history. And they're calling it the new Watergate, the Australian Watergate. So I'm going to keep this real simple. It's a fairly complex story. It took me some time of reading it, reading several stories, getting a lot of information to even be able to understand it. Okay, so I'm going to try to keep it simple. So here's the basics. Here's the basics that you need to know. Okay? So there is a whistleblower, along with his attorney, who are now being prosecuted by the Australian government. Kind of reminds you of like an Assange sort of thing or something, where there was this whistleblower who was in the Australian Intelligence Agency who was involved in the bugging of the government offices of some government officials in East Timor, specifically in Timor-Leste. Now, for those of you not familiar with the geography, this area is kind of East Timor is really very, very close to Australia. They're only separated by a waterway, and I think it's the Timor Sea, I think is what it's called, either the Sea of Timor or Timor Sea. That's a waterway that divides Australia from East Timor or Timor-Leste. They used to be part of Indonesia, but I think they're independent now. So there was a negotiation, and this has been going on for quite some time. This story actually goes back to 2014 and probably even before that. So in this waterway between Australia and East Timor, it's very rich in oil and natural gas. So over the years, they've had various treaties as to who controls what percentage of that territory where they do this drilling for oil and gas. So in order to better their position, and on behalf of a private oil and gas firm, the Australian government bugged the offices of the government officials in East Timor in order to find out what they were talking about so they could use that in the negotiations to get a better position. Now, they got blown up in this deal, and this whistleblower came forward. The case eventually went to The Hague, the international court, where this whistleblower came forward and ended up carrying the day for East Timor, or Timor-Leste. And as a result, now the Australian government is retaliating against this whistleblower and his lawyer, and they're now pursuing them to put them in prison, to prosecute them. And citizens in Australia, many of whom are still very interested in the Spygate story and follow the Spygate story, and are wondering what role, and are demanding to know what role their government played in the Spygate fiasco here in the States. The same people, along with millions and millions of other Australians, overwhelmingly are in support of the whistleblower, and they're giving the Australian government plenty of hell over this, because as far as a lot of people are concerned, these guys were honest guys. They were whistleblowers. They pointed out some crimes by the Australian government and intelligence agencies who were involved in this bugging. And so it's making big headlines. It's a real political fiasco. The government of Australia going after the whistleblower and his lawyer, and they've been caught red-handed. They basically had to admit to it. There's nothing they can do because the whistleblower provided all the evidence. It's a slam dunk. The new treaty has been signed, and it did not work out well for the Australian government, and they're not very happy about it. And now they're seeking revenge against the whistleblower and against his lawyer. So now, here's where the story gets very sticky, and here's where it plays into what's going on here with our own Spygate story. So, we do not know the name of the whistleblower. He's only identified now as Witness K. Witness K. But Witness K was one of the people in the intelligence agency, which in Australia they call it the ASIS, Australian Secret Intelligence Service. The Australian Secret Intelligence Service. And this whistleblower worked in that agency and knew about the plan. I'm not sure if he was actually involved in it, but he certainly knew what was going on, planting the bugs in the offices of the government officials in East Timor, specifically in Timor-Leste. So we have the whistleblower, who's identified as Witness K, and also his lawyer is also being pursued for criminal charges, and his name is Bernard Collery, Collery. So Witness K and Bernard Collery, his lawyer, are being pursued and facing indictment by the Australian government for revealing state secrets, violating the state secrets law or clause of the Australian government. Now, here's where it gets even more interesting. The Australian diplomat, who was the senior diplomat over the department that is over the agency, ASIS, the Australian Secret Intelligence Service, the person who was the senior political leadership of that agency, or the department of government that that agency falls under, was Alexander Downer. Alexander Down the Hatch Downer. Now, here is where it gets even more interesting. Witness K decided to come forward and blow the whistle because he found out that Alexander Down the Hatch Downer received a very lucrative job as a consultant with Woodside. Woodside is a company who was seeking access to the oil and gas fields in that region. In other words, this company, Woodside, is a company that does oil and gas production, harvesting and production of oil and gas. They had a major stake in the treaty between Australia and East Timor, specifically Timor-Leste. Alexander Downer had been brought in as a consultant and got a very lucrative position as a consultant with Woodside. And so when whistleblower K found out about this and found out that Alexander Downer was going to benefit greatly and that he was the highest level politician or bureaucrat, he was over this department, which is over this intelligence agency, ASIS, then this whistleblower figured out that, oh, Downer probably ordered this bugging, and that's what's being reported now, is that Downer ordered the bugging. They planted over 200 listening devices into the offices of the government officials in East Timor to listen in on their conversation. And this is not in dispute. This is already a closed deal. It's a done deal. That case is closed. It happened. There's nobody questioning whether or not that happened. The only question is unraveling it and figuring out exactly who made the call. But right now, because Downer was the senior bureaucrat over that department of government that's over the intelligence agency that actually conducted the physical planting the bugs and doing the spying, it is Alexander Down the Hatch Downer that is now at the center of this controversy. So the Australian government, along with Downer, and on behalf of his friends at Woodside, wanted inside information to gain advantage in negotiations over the treaty that would decide the split in the area where the drilling would occur, which would be in the Timor Sea. The Timor Sea. The bugging actually began in 2004. There was over 200 listening devices planted. Witness K and his attorney, Mr. Gallery, are being charged with violating State Secrets Act. Downer was the head of the department which was over the spy agency which conducted the spying. This involves being, and the people caught up in this are the highest level intel, the top 3 or 4 intel agents of that agency, ASIS. They are caught up in this, and it's being reported by the media and by people watching this story in Australia that for the past 3 years, up until the time that this went into the international courts, that both political parties and both previous political presidential administrations in Australia have tried to cover it up. But once the whistleblower came forward at the international courts and blew the whistle, they could no longer cover it up because it all came out. And now it's a retribution and revenge by the Australian government and against this witness K and his lawyer. And Alexander Down the Hatch Downer is being fingered as the central scrutinizer, possibly the one who gave the order, and it's believed he's the most likely one because he's the one who would have benefited the most. He was being paid a very, very lucrative consulting fee by the company who would have primarily been the ones to have benefited from this treaty, assuming that the treaty worked out well for the Australian side. And keep in mind, East Timor, or Timor-Leste, is a very, very poor country with not a whole lot of revenue. They rely really heavily on what they get from oil and gas from the Timor Sea. Unlike Australia, who's a big, rich, powerful country, you know, it's just a few extra bucks in the kitty for the government, but it's mostly private companies that benefit, specifically the one that was paying Downer as a consultant. So it surely looks like Downer was the one who probably initiated the bugging of the East Timor government officials. Now let's keep something else in mind, that Downer continues. In fact, his most recent tweet on August 6th, he says he guarantees he did not spy on the Trump campaign for the Clintons. He says, of course I didn't. It's complete rubbish. I'm not left-wing. I was the leader of the Liberal Party in Australia. That's the Australian Conservative Party. I have fought against the left all my adult life. This, of course, we all know is bullshit. Downer lambasted Trump in his meeting with Papadopoulos, and in fact, he even told Papadopoulos he supported Hillary and didn't like Obama. We know that Downer met with Strzok on August the 2nd, 2016. We know that Downer works for the private intelligence firm Hackloot. We know that Downer was speaking at a conference in London the same week that Papadopoulos was being set up by Halper and Mifsud. Mr. Durham, you need to interview Mr. Downer. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm all out of time. I'll be back tomorrow with more TowerGate. See you guys. Bye.